How are we doing, everybody? Back at you with another video. Today we're going to be talking about the law of the buy-in uh, by John C. Maxwell in his 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership book. Uh, I just got done reading it not that long ago, and very important. Very important, and it opened my eyes up to certain things and just helped me to realign my thinking on. Moving forward and just growing as a better leader. The law of the buy-in basically is about uh, the importance of people buying into a leader before they buy into his vision. You know, uh, the author gave a great example of him putting himself in this particular law because, as you may know, I talked about it before. The author is a pastor and pastored the church at one point. And so, as a new pastor, he came in with the vision of enlarging the auditorium because he was just looking at the growth of the church, and see that's where the growth was going. But at the time, the leaders of the church that were there before he were invested in the idea of uh, building a new activity center. And so, the leader said, he already knew that would not be feasible for the church. But instead of pushing back on the idea, he used wisdom. And so what he did was he asked the leaders to come to him with research explaining why the activity center is a good idea to move forward in. And so, uh, as they're coming to him, bringing him, research about why the activities center is a good idea, he would ask them questions, and that would cause them to have to go back and do some more research. And all during this time, he knew he didn't want to do the 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 activity center, but he did give it a chance and allow the leaders to do some research, and he opened up the discussion. But all during the time, he was invested in the idea of enlarging the auditorium. Okay. And so during this time of the leaders researching the activity center, he, you know, built up credibility with the leaders. He was working on other plans to grow the church, and that's what happened. Over the several months that the leaders took to research, uh, the thought process of building an activity center. He executed plans to grow the church. He built up credibility with the leaders, spent time with them, built relationships, uh, really dug deep down, and really uh, you know put himself on Front Street and made it about building a relationship with the leaders. And so over the course of time of him asking so many questions, uh, the leaders finally decided the activity center wasn't a good idea. And then sometime after that, after they saw the growth of the church, um, they realized that building an auditorium is more feasible for the church as a whole. And so, John C. Maxwell operated in something that I know Paul talks about in Corinthians when I think about it. He talks about how Paul in Corinthians talks about love, and one of the things that he says love never does is insist on his own way. You know, um, I think about this story in the Bible where Israel wanted a king. God didn't want a king for them because he told them that their king is going to send them off to war, their children off to war. It was one of the reasons that God listed. He also said, he's going to impose taxes. Um, and you know, the Israel was looking at the other uh, countries, the other kingdoms, um, the other nations, and they saw that they had a king, and so the people wanted a king just like them. And at the time, God was their king, but it got to a point where and the prophet, of course, he's doing the speaking for God, uh, and the people got to the point where they just insisted on uh, having a king. And the prophet at one point told God, unfortunately, they rejected me. You know, regarding what you were talking about. And God said something to me that, God said something to Samuel that I never forget. He told Samuel, they didn't reject you, they rejected me. And so that, and even though God had a better plan for them, God didn't insist on his own way. You know, he ended up anointing Samuel. He ended up anointing, having Samuel to anoint Saul to become their king. And Saul did exactly what God said he would do: impose taxes and send their children off to war. So as a leader, you have to be, you have to have enough love for those that you're leading, that even if they don't, want your plan, that you don't use your position to insist on your own way, you know, and you have to be patient with them to even help them with their way, with what they want to do, depending on, especially if it's not something that, if it's something that you can help them with, then help them. Of course, if it's something that you can't help them, if it's sinful or, something that's just a completely against the nature of God, then of course you can't help them. But in this case, God helped them, and allowed them to have their way. And I think it was a huge demonstration of love. I believe what John C. Maxwell did with the church, uh, that he was leading, was that, he did, well, by him not insisting on his own way, um, they eventually accepted, his provision and his plan. But, just going back to the story of how, God and how Israel was wanting a king, one of the things that sums up this chapter is that John C. Maxwell is saying that people will not accept a vision if they don't accept the person first. And, that's something that, was basically, in that story with God and Israel, is that, like he told Samuel, they rejected me, and if they reject God, then they're going to reject his plan. And, one thing that the author talked about was that, you know, uh, people or leaders, they first have to understand that their vision, their dream, is second to them as a person in terms of in terms of the point of view of the people. He was talking about how this one Silicon Valley investor had spent 6 months getting funding for her first venture, and it was countless presentations, long time, right? She took 6 months to get funding for a venture, and after that was successful, she had a second venture, and in the second venture she said that it didn't take her, the first time took her 6 months, second time didn't take her 6 minutes before people wanted to invest 5 million into her, and how she had to actually turn people away from wanting to uh, 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 you know uh, she had to turn people away uh, from wanting her to accept their money, you know. Um, And it's interesting enough that the author didn't discuss. It's not so much the second venture was better than the first venture. It was about the fact that she built up credibility, okay, to the point where people were more interested in what they were more interested in being connected to her more so than being connected to the vision, okay. um because since they accepted her and saw her credibility, now it's much easier for them to accept the vision. And so if a leader can get people to buy into him, it not only helps people to protect or helps people to invest in his vision, but also protects him when problems arise. And I just give an example. President Clinton, uh, had support from the National Organization of Women, and someone named Paula Jones accused Bill Clinton of sexual harassment. And the National Organization of Women is really against sexual harassment of all, especially women, right? And so the author was explaining how, because the National Organization of Women had bought into Bill Clinton, even when he was facing allegations of sexual harassment, he didn't lose their support. You know what I mean? So the author is emphasizing that the buying in of the person is more important than the buying in of the vision. And I think about, David. I think about David and Goliath. After he fought Goliath, the people he built credibility up with them. You know what I mean? Uh, he got the confidence of the people to the point where they chanted, you know, Saul has killed thousands, and David has killed tens of thousands. You know what I mean? So he actually built up credibility with the people over and beyond the king. One thing I see about Jesus, and I'm reading, you reading the life and story of Jesus before he started even working miracles, anything like that. You see how the Bible said that he grew uh, in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. You know, um, and actually Romans 14 and 18 actually supports this, and how uh, those who serve Christ will be acceptable uh, to God, will be acceptable, both accepted by God and man. So, in this chapter, it's emphasizing to a leader, you have to work on acceptance first. You have to work on your credibility. You have to work on uh, your favor. You know what I mean, with God and man. It's like Jesus. Before you start trying to push and tell people what your purpose is, before you heard anything Jesus saying about what his purpose is on earth, he grew in favor with God and man, and that's important. You know what I mean? Especially, I even think about Joshua in the Bible, about how he had to, as a new leader, he had to build his credibility up with the people. God proved him as a leader, and God showed you. You will see in the beginning of Joshua, God showed the people that he was with Joshua, because God couldn't get the people to buy into Joshua's vision, okay, that he has given Joshua, before he shows the people that he is favored by God, and God it will support him and be with him like he was with Moses. So all that's important, and one thing that the author didn't talk about, that definitely I would include. There's not just always about buying or not being bought into, but sometimes there's levels of buying. Sometimes when it comes to husband and wife, the wife has bought into her husband's leadership to a certain point. At my company, I know that even with my team, you know, they have bought into me, as because of the my growing the department, things like that, I have gained a lot of respect with them. They have definitely bought in with me as a leader, but also I have to remain cognizant of at what level have they bought into me as. You know what I mean? Because what I don't want to do, you want as a leader, you don't want to push who's following you beyond their comfort level with you as a leader. You know what I mean? That's why it's always important to be cognizant at what level do my team or who I'm leading have bought into me as a person. And that's going to let me know at what level I can execute my vision. And then maybe before I maybe only be able to execute half of my vision because they only had bought into me 50%. And then I'm looking at like what John C. Maxwell had done. He already knew and that they've only bought into me on a certain level. So during that time that uh uh I'm waiting or during that time where I can execute the other 50% of my vision, I understand I gotta build credibility. I got to build in certain areas, and that's talking with the team, you know, talking with the leaders, asking questions, understanding are uh, where are they looking to see uh, uh, to see me, grow or to see me as a leader, demonstrate leadership in order for them to buy in. And many times it is about growth. It's about success. Success many times wins the respect of a lot of people that you're leading. So you may need to reach a certain level of success to encourage people about the next level that you want to go into. So that's something to think about, and it's important. Not to take it personal if people don't buy completely into your vision, but just see it as a challenge for you to use this leadership law of the buy-in. To push forward in the areas where you need to grow, become stronger. Because no one's exempt. Jesus was not exempt. David was not exempt. All of them had to, uh, you know, uh, grow in favor of God and men before they can move forward, in their purpose. So, just wanted to discuss that, and I look forward to the next chapter.